Welcome to Innovate Newport, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to our first series of our series called The Blue and You, Understanding the Blue Economy. My name is Molly Williams, and I'm the Director of Innovation and Entrepreneurship here. Very exciting things going on, and this is really our first kickoff event coming out of COVID. So it's great to see you in person. We will be recording all of our sessions and sharing them in a virtual library on our website. So if you have friends who couldn't make it and want to see these, please point them in that direction. I want to thank the City of Newport, really, for helping me get this going. Joe Nicholson, City Manager, back here. I also want to thank Jim O'Halloran. And I want to thank Nick, who are helping with IT. So thank you so much for everything. Today is really our kickoff session for the Blue Economy. This is I think of this as like Blue 101. Okay, I've lived in a lot of different states. We're all on the water, and Rhode Island is by far the most beautiful. And I've only been here a few years, but you know what I'm amazed by is just how. I mean, there's water everywhere, and just when I think about the different industries and how they're all connected, it's just fascinating. And I think the more we're aware of where we live, the more appreciative of it we will be, more engaged in it. So that's kind of the point of this series. Today, I want to welcome our panelists, our experts in the field. We have Pete Rumsey, whose position is Chief Business Development Officer at URI Research Foundation. Welcome, Pete. We also have Judith Underwood, who is the CEO of Blue Institute Labs. So I'm gonna turn it over to you all. They'll do a presentation, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end. So enjoy, and please dig into the refreshments in back if you'd like. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Molly. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. Great.
Fantastic.
Thank you. So welcome. This is really exciting for the two of us to be sitting up here. I've known Pete a few years, and we've talked a lot about blue things over the years. And I don't know if the slides will work or not, but a little bit about my background. I am an environmentalist. I am a teacher as part of my background. And first and foremost, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm very interested in building companies and building jobs and building workforce and engaging young people to see what is out there in different sectors. I'm going to start off with this slide, because if you know nothing about the blue economy, just keep this in mind. It's an enormous opportunity for economic growth for all different types of communities. And this number, $1.5 trillion, it's a very large number, but it's a very real number. And other communities around the world are already fully engaged in the blue economy. And as you'll hear tonight, we are as well. We're just not quite yet cohesive, I think. We're getting there. And our ecosystems are coming together.
One thing to say about this slide as well is that 1.5 trillion is supposed to grow to be 3 trillion in 10 years. So by 2030, that doubles. And with over 40 million people employed in the sector. So the amount of growth in this sector is staggering, and especially for this state. And it's something that we really feel very strongly is imperative for the resiliency of the state in downturns, upturns, everything. This is where the growth is. So it's something we've really got our eyes on. Absolutely.
Just a tiny bit of background. The term blue economy comes from a world economist, Gunther Pauli, in 2010, and he coined this phrase to talk about using the resources in our oceans, in our water systems, in a sustainable way. Okay, so just for a show of hands, raise your hand if you know what green tech or climate, green economy is. Yeah. Okay, so if you think about the oceans, and I think, can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. Okay, So here is the classic phrase there. Can you read that, Pete?
Sure.
I can't read.
Yep.
The blue economy, the top there, just the.
Okay, so the blue economy is, by definition, the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihoods and jobs, and ocean ecosystem health.
Yeah. And so we're going to come back to this slide. Pete's going to go more into detail about how this is affected here in Rhode Island. But just to give you a wide sense of how broad the blue economy is, okay? We've got renewable energy, we have fisheries, maritime transport, tourism, climate change, and waste management, as well as defense, which Pete will go into further. Go to the next slide, please. Okay. This is one of my favorite sectors to talk about. So 80% of all the goods that we buy today are transported via ship around the world. You probably didn't know that, but 80%, and that number is supposed to double within the next 20 years. So shipping is a major, major business around the world and a major business locally. And how many of you remember, I think it was a month ago in the Suez Canal, there was a ship that got stuck, right? So think about that. Think about the impact that had on the goods and services going around the country and to your doorsteps. Were any of you personally impacted by that? Possibly? A little delay in arrival of things. So I'm just going to do a quick segue here. The Blue Institute Labs is, we are creating an actual physical space where young companies, startups, can come together and use shared resources, laboratories, machine shops, maker labs, if you want to call it that, to create different products and to support different types of industry. And right now we have our Blue Incubator, but it's virtual. So we're working with over 24 companies from around the world, actually. A number of them are from Rhode Island, but most of them are from the Northeast and Europe. And one of them in particular is working on security for the maritime. His company here in New England, they create safety systems for ships' captains so that that kind of backlog that would happen in the Suez Canal would never happen, because the captain would be able to know first off that the ship is moving too fast or it's not going to make that turn. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the bottom line for the blue economy is our oceans, and the bottom line for me is the sustainability of our oceans. If we don't keep that in mind as we move forward, we will get to that $1 trillion, multiple $1 trillion, but our environment will have been ruined. So moving forward, we really want to do the blue economy in a sustainable way. Think about it. The air we breathe, right, is coming off of the oceans and getting recycled. 70% of climate regeneration comes from our oceans. We don't think about that. We always think it's just the cars that we drive and that the ocean isn't a part of this system, but it is. They're all interconnected. Next slide, please. So I love this slide. It's actually from the Small Island States group out of the United Nations. And this is where we can go with the blue economy. Smart shipping, it should be an inclusive environment, and taking care of plastics in the ocean. So I think for me, there's a culture that needs to happen around blue economy for the blue economy to be that much stronger. So I'm going to pass it over now.
Fantastic. So I think that's our last formal slide, because we didn't want to kill you by PowerPoint. So what we intended to do is just have a little discussion for my part on the resources, the spaces, places, and people that are here in Rhode Island. And I'll just start out by saying that I will certainly forget people, and I will by no means be inclusive, but I'll do my very best to paint a good picture of those resources. And also, Judith, please interrupt at any time that you wish. My name is Pete Rumsey. I am with the University of Rhode Island, and I'm the Chief Business Development Officer with the UI Research Foundation. I'm very focused on creating innovation campuses for the state. My previous job for the last 3 or 4 years was working for the Commerce Secretary and the Governor of Rhode Island, creating innovation campuses. We are creating an agricultural innovation campus, an agricultural tech innovation campus over near the URI campus. We're also involved in starting the 401 Tech Bridge, which is a materials innovation campus up in Portsmouth, just up the road a little ways. And then very involved with something called the RI Hub. Getting feedback on this, is that okay? Just want to make sure, okay. Very involved with Rhode Island Hub, RI Hub, which is a generic incubator and accelerator for startups. So whereas Judith brilliantly focuses on the blue economy, RI Hub is more open to all and oftentimes partners with people like Judith to specialize in individual specialty areas. And actually RI Hub is going to start having an office here as well, as well as in Providence, which is fantastic because this the Innovate Newport is really a fantastic location. So what I intended to talk about very quickly, by way, my background, I'm an electrical engineer, but sorry. I wasn't counting on anybody, so that's great. So electrical engineer by education, but really an entrepreneur and innovator after a short stint being an electrical engineer, and very interested in economic development. And the only real credentials I have in the blue economy is that I was raised by a biochemist who was a professor of aquaculture. So it goes deep, but I'm really, in the last 4 or 5 years, become very integrated with and getting in depth with people like Judith. And now I'm very focused on working with URI in the entire ecosystem in Rhode Island and actually New England and beyond in creating a Blue Tech Innovation Campus for Rhode Island. So as we start to look at that, we think about what's the basis upon which Rhode Island should build a Blue Tech Innovation Campus. And you know, Rhode Island really has a very storied history to somewhat in Blue Tech based upon supporting the Navy historically. And but in recent years, there's an unprecedented amount of research as well as places, spaces, and programs that have come up. On the research side, there's been over $500 million in investment associated with the University of Rhode Island and other universities throughout the state. And I'm going to look at my notes so I don't forget too much. But about 2 years ago, there was almost $100 million from NOAA to chart out the greater economic zone 200 miles off the shore of New England. That alone was $100 million. We have a $125 million research vessel coming very shortly at URI named the Narragansett Dawn. It was recently announced. And that's going to be an incredible platform for the state and for our region to use for research and expanding our reach. There is almost $20 million program called the National Institute of Underwater Vehicle Technology based at UConn and at URI, and rapidly expanding, working with NUIC and the Office of Naval Research on building out underwater vehicles as well. URI recently erected a $150 million engineering building, and right now, the Ocean Engineering program combined with the Graduate School of Oceanography at URI is one of the top programs in the world. It's this rare combination where you have, I'll call them kids, but where you have kids and adults who are cross-educated in engineering, environmental sciences, even social sciences, as well as oceanography. And that's a very rare asset that we have to work with here. There's recently been a bond passed last year for $45 million to build an additional Ocean Technology Center at URI. So the Bay campus is actually in the midst of a revolution in building and modernization. So over the next 10 years, that campus is going to become one of the best campuses in the world for oceanography, engineering, and all things blue. And finally, last but not least, and there's a little pivot here, is URI with 8 other universities in the state have been the recipients over the past 4 or 5 years of an EPSCoR program where they created something, and I want to get it right, the Coastal Ecology Assessment, Innovation and Modeling, or CAIM program, where they're studying the effects of climate change. And what that is, in simple terms, the way they've gone at it is they've put together a lot of buoys in the bay with monitoring on it and sensors, where they are taking in a massive amount of combination of data from all kinds of sensors. And that is just really the beginning of something that we envision becoming a smart bay for Rhode Island, and combine it with, and I'll talk a little bit more about the spaces and places, but combined with the Naval Underwater Warfare Center's assets, as well as Raytheon's assets, Rhode Island has the makings of a smart bay where you can monitor in the air, on the surface, maritime, and below the surface, and create basically a living laboratory where both universities, startups, and nonprofit entities and universities can come in real time and study the effects of climate change, as well as how all the different businesses interact in one place. So we're very excited about that. And that, again, was really talking about the research and the investment that the state has had over the last 10 years, which is really creates an opportunity for us to take that and turn it into commercial ventures, like the startups that Judith was talking about, and also for us to attract companies to come in from around the world to situate themselves here. As far as our ecosystem, which is what I want to pivot to, it is really unparalleled. Like I said before, historically our ecosystem was rooted in supporting naval resources here in Newport. So we still have the Naval Underwater Warfare Center and their Narragansett Bay Test Facility that I referred to before, which is an incredible asset, especially combined with the CAIM assets. We have Raytheon United Technologies here, and this is a little defense-oriented on the front end, but then I'll pivot to more of the private industry. General Dynamics Electric Boat is here, over in Quonset, and actually just got another $10 billion contract to build the Columbia-class submarines there. So I think if I'm doing my math right, that's $30 billion in contracts that they've been awarded in the last 3 to 5 years, and that's a lot of jobs for the state. The Naval War College is right around here. Salve Regina is right up the road and has some incredible programs. I've already talked a bit too much probably about URI. You can tell where I'm from and what I'm proud of, but it's our flagship university, and that's for all of us, no matter where we're located. And it's both, not many people know, it's both a land grant and a sea grant university. So that gives it a very interesting situation. It can act as a convener, coordinator, and a communicator for the entire state and for industry, both private and public, and even nonprofits. So that's how we really see ourselves at URI, as the flagship research institution. A few things closer to home here, again, a little bit on the defensive side, we have, you maybe know the name. If you don't, it's hard not to. Molly McGee leads the Synedia group here, the Southeastern New England Defense Industry Alliance, but Synedia for those of us, just an acronym that we throw around, and the Undersea Technology Innovation Consortium. And that's a very powerful group that brings together, I mean, ultimately here, primarily on this island, we have 150 companies focusing on materials innovation and production, and I think over 300 companies.
In the UTEC, 324, I think.
Yeah, based, looking at maritime type technologies, and that's that's really the heart and soul of Rhode Island in this blue tech space. On top of that, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I talked before about one innovation campus, the 401 Tech Bridge, which is nearby here. The 401 Tech Bridge is a materials innovation center, and in that consortium that brought that together, and it's going to be about a $6 to $8 million facility in the what used to be the Hodges Badge building up in Portsmouth. They, as partners, have Polaris, which is the manufacturing extension program, NUIC, Naval Underwater Warfare Center that I talked about before, IRIS, the International Yacht Restoration School and Technology, and Jay Coogan runs that school, is part of that consortium as well. RIMTA, the Rhode Island Marine Trades Association, is a partner. The Composite Alliance of Rhode Island is part of that as well. The Rhode Island RITEN, the Rhode Island Textile Innovation Network, is a partner as well. RIMA, the Rhode Island Manufacturing Association, and a couple of private partners like Torrey are part of it. Hope Global is part of it as well. And
Mass Challenge.
And now, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And now Mass Challenge is part of that. And actually, 401 Tech Bridge is sponsoring 2 cohorts over the next 2 years of blue tech focused startup companies. And by the way, you hear us talking about it's not really a competitive thing. These startup companies can flow back and forth between Judith's organization. Right. They can go from Mass Challenge. There's also See Ahead out of Boston.
Yeah, and there's a difference between an incubator and an accelerator. Absolutely. And
why don't you go ahead and explain that?
Sure. So an accelerator is taking a company and accelerating them forward, right? That's right. I think of it as kind of an MBA on steroids. Like in a 6-month period, a company really goes through a grind, and they've got strict curriculum that they follow. And when they come out at the end of that, they're usually in a position where they can go before a funder and make a pitch for their company and hopefully get that money.
That's exactly right.
There's a second kind of accelerator, which we ran this winter virtually, an accelerator with an E, where we focused in on companies that had been through an accelerator and needed some help with the technology piece, with the engineering, with the scientific support. Because if you're not in a university, very often it's really hard to get that kind of mentorship. So we ran that over the winter, yep. It's really nice because it's starting to bring things like we're collaborating, right? Which is great. Then these companies can, I'm not quite sure what the 401 Tech Bridge, what their requirements are for a company to be there. And so our focus is going to be not so much on the advanced programming, but having this location where they can come and having these shared resources, not only for startups, but for companies that may have offices, but they can't afford that really expensive machine. So if the expensive machine is at the 401 Tech, we won't have that in our shop. That doesn't make any sense, right?
Come right up the road.
And and vice versa. And our differentiator will also be that we will have students coming in and doing internships and working with the startups, which is a real special thing, and high school students and middle school students coming in and experiencing that entrepreneurship, and also having scientists from URI coming in and giving talks, and to kind of make this accessible. That's the way I look at it.
That's exactly.
Because I've taught at all levels. I've taught the community college level. I've taught at preschool, actually, when my kids were little. And I taught high school for many years. And if you see it, you can believe it, right? That's my motto. If you see somebody doing something or you get to experience that, you get to try it out, it makes a world of difference. Yeah. And there's so many job opportunities, but as a young person, you need to know what kind of steps you're going to need to take. And not only have somebody from your school telling you what you need to do, but being able to ask those questions of somebody that's doing it. That makes a real difference in a kid's life, I find.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So
what I discussed with you as we started talking more about the nuts and bolts of this is the research and the investment that's here in Rhode Island. Then I talked a little bit about the companies and the consortiums and the groups like the Blue Institute and Mass Challenge and See Ahead that run incubators and accelerators that accelerate companies to funding. And the last thing I wanted to talk about, though, and it was on purposely the last, are the spaces and places that are being created around here. First and foremost, the one you're sitting in this Innovate Newport, which we, during COVID, not as popular, right? But here we are today. And at least for myself and Judith and I were saying, there's nothing like actually being face to face. What we really find with, and we're both really the innovation entrepreneur people, the magic happens when you put people with different cross-functional technologies and ideas, and literally they are in the kitchen and they both grab a Coke and sit down and talk to each other and decide to combine their technologies. Without that kind of, you just can't get there with Zoom, or it's pretty hard with Zoom and WebEx and phone calls. And so these spaces and places are very important in the long term, with all due caveats due to COVID. But Innovate Newport's an absolutely incredible space, and the great Joe Nicholson's back there somewhere who's responsible for this. And other spaces we have are places like the Cambridge Innovation Center, the Wexford Innovation Center building up in Providence, and within that Cambridge Innovation Campus, which is a similar setup up in Providence, where you can come in and do innovation in a very similar model. And between Innovate Newport and the Cambridge Innovation Center and programs like Judith's and Mass Challenge and See Ahead, and all of the companies, large and small, and all the consortiums, we have all the bones here and all the makings of an incredible ocean blue tech innovation effort as a state. And I myself, including Judith, are very focused on making sure that over the next few years, we really take this opportunity, because we haven't, it's not a popular word, but I'll hopefully use it in the right context. We as a state have an entitlement and responsibility to make sure that we bring all those things together and punch above our weight. Using another analogy, we really want to skate to where the puck is going in this blue tech world, and make sure that we build jobs and companies that make us more resilient as a space in this very rapidly, more resilient as a state in this rapidly growing space, so that we can ride through little perturbations economically.
And it's not just the state, although Rhode Island is economically, traditionally, and physically located right in the center of New England. And we always call this Blue England with the little quotes, because really the history of New England is about seafaring, it's about fishing, it's aquaculture. I grew up in Worcester, Mass., which you probably didn't know this, but at my grandfather's time, it was the second largest port, the largest port in New England. And you say, how? Well, a long time ago, the Blackstone River actually worked as like the Erie Canal, right? They had, they dragged these cargo ships up and down, and flat bottom. And but New England, we are all connected, I think, around this blue economy. There are different kind of clusters, there's a blue tech cluster here that extends out to Hui.
Woods Hole.
Woods Hole, sorry. And then up in Maine, they have a very strong aquaculture and floating wind, offshore wind cluster that's growing. And lobster, because all the lobsters are heading north because the water is getting too warm. And here in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, we have two very strong, and they're working together. I think Will's in the room, can speak to that. The offshore wind.
Yeah, that was my punchline.
Yeah, oh, sorry, I stole his punchline.
No,
A huge opportunity for New England to be this blue England, and as a region, just be a real strength in this country around the blue economy.
That's absolutely right. So whereas I started out talking about the defense and our opportunity there and how it's been the lifeblood for so long and shall continue, immediately in front of us, something that we can see, and again, Will Cott is in the room, is offshore energy, offshore renewable wind energy is something that is upon us and going to be absolutely an incredible opportunity in the next 3 to 5 years, and even before that. So that's really our entitlement. And Judith and I, and by the way, this series, Molly has put together all the right people, honestly. We basically have we've touched on almost every one of the speakers and what they're going to talk about. We have all the makings of a real incredible blue economy, and really a growing economy here for the next 5 to 10 years that we're very focused on. So I think that's all we had prepared to speak about.
Yeah, I think we can both talk for days, but
yeah.
we'll put you to sleep.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much. The whole point of this, as I said earlier, the point of this first session was to give an overview of the ecosystem. So you've heard of a lot of different names of people, places, organizations, associations, companies, and your head's probably spinning, as mine was 2 months ago when I started this job. But it's really fascinating, and I'm meeting some incredibly smart people who are so dedicated to this and they're such visionaries, and they're so eager to work together. That's the most exciting part, is that the collaboration that is happening now and going forward that is going to happen. And it's really taking off. So this was the overview. Every Thursday this summer, we'll have a different session that will then focus in on each of the different sectors. So we will have an offshore wind power session. We will have one that's specifically focused on defense industry. We will have one on the marine trades, et cetera. The calendar's out in the hall if you want to see that lineup again. But we encourage you to come back and learn, be able to kind of just, hone in on one at a time. And also, I'll just kind of explain a little bit about Innovate Newport. So we're obviously a co-working space. So we have tenants, we have members, it's a co-working space, so people can come here and co-work or use huddle rooms or board rooms. But it's those kind of organic touch points that are magic when you're just getting that cup of coffee or the Coke or just walking around and you run into people and just start the conversations, and it's amazing. That's where the collaboration happens. But my role really is to develop programming and events. So some programming will come right out of Innovate Newport, like this series, but much of it will be in collaboration with our strategic partners, like the two of you, like RIHUB, like RIMTA, like the other organizations who are doing incredible things. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to collaborate with them and do it together and help each other. It's about helping each other and supporting each other for the greater cause. So that's very exciting to me. So I think we'd like to open it up to any questions we might have. Yes, and I think rather than pass this around, if you could just speak up and I'll repeat the question.
But one more
Yes.
thing, there are some pretty smart people in the room too that know a lot too. So if anybody sees that we missed something very big, please point it out and share it with the group.
Yes.
So I'm actually going to stand up because
Yep.
it's easier for me to
Nice.
project.
Great.
So I'm Sheila Hamami, and I'm with Triple Ring Technologies, which is an engineering firm and a venture capital firm. We're out of Boston. We're happy to report that Boston traffic has recovered from the pandemic. We were a little bit late. So my question, and this is sort of to Pete as a state employee, but hopefully there'll be other people who can help with that. So I'm super impressed with the investment that the state is putting in through URI to these innovation campuses and the industrial consortiums. My question is, and this is something where I see Rhode Island seems to be very much ahead of the game with regard to helping capitalism be better. Is there any state effort to organize venture capital or investments such that the startups have a little bit of help other than simply being out there in the great ocean with all the other startups and having to find their way through? Is there state investment that either goes through the universities to help translational research and help the startups sort of through those early pre-seed and seed stage? What is in that early investment phase to help everybody after they've established their company and maybe gotten a good idea and think that they have a business plan?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I don't think I can repeat that question.
No, I can.
Hopefully,
And if
Sheila,
I,
thanks for projecting. So
I-
yeah.
As a professor.
I taught middle
Yeah.
school drama, and then I had to teach people how to project their
No.
voices. So well done, Sheila.
and thank you for being here, by the way. Do you live on the island, or did you come down from Boston?
No, we drove from the South End.
Wow, that's a testament to Innovate Newport. Seriously, it's fantastic that you came down for this. Thank
We've
you.
been collaborating on
Yeah,
some things.
yeah. And I'll answer your question.
Sheila's fault.
It's
Very-
my fault, yeah.
that's
No,
fantastic.
Sheila's phenomenal.
That's fantastic. I was wondering what the connection was. If I thank you for the question, I'll give you a few different answers, and if I fall off the stool, I'm sure Will will take over for me, because the Commerce Secretary would love your question.
Yes.
Yeah, and I do, as far as your compliment about how the state has been capital friendly or capitalist friendly, our former governor and now the Commerce Secretary for the United States, Gina Raimondo, and Secretary Pryor really can take a lot of credit for that and that attitude. As far as programs go for at that early stage, I'd answer the question two different ways. First of all, you should know that the Commerce Department has been, or Commerce Rhode Island has been prolific with innovation vouchers for startup companies, working primarily with our universities, Brown, URI, Salve, Bryant, and giving up to $50,000 grants to fund research with the institutions along with those companies to develop IP, ideas, even to run some tests. So that was definitely a Governor Raimondo and Secretary Pryor a flagship program that continues today and is extremely valuable for those early stage companies. Also, due to some of the same people and folks like here at Innovate Newport, we are creating organizations. So the state really helped funding folks like Mass Challenge, which are these startups incubators where companies come in. You're very familiar with
I
Mass
didn't know.
Challenge probably. And
I didn't know they funded Mass Challenge.
back in the day, they helped
Early
with
on,
grants
yeah.
in the early to get them established with some of the overhead. And those groups, as you know, create challenges and grants to the companies that come accelerate out of them and become viable organizations. So really creating the programming and helping the organizations get established here that then can fund those startups has been a real core focus. And in addition to the Blue Institute and folks like See Ahead, who actually have offices here in Rhode Island and other incubator accelerators programs. And then it continues to be a lot of attention as we go forward, especially with COVID funding coming in, to find different ways we can help these startup companies. So with our innovation campuses that I talked with you before, and like the Blue Tech Innovation Campus that we're talking about, we are very much trying to conceive of ways that we can make sure that venture capital is there at the time. As you know, it's the secret ingredient on top of the startups to create the sucking sound or the force to pull them forward and be successful. So we are really looking at different models where we can spur more venture capital companies to come and focus here. Yeah.
Great question.
Will,
Thank
go
you.
ahead. Will's got something I didn't say.
If I could add one thing, venture mentoring services is part of RIHub as well. So RIHub was funded through the innovation campuses.
Yes.
And then venture mentoring services is about 80 mentors. I did a mentoring session this morning for Rhode Island company that's starting up. And they, through that network of 80 people, connect people. Pete's also a mentor as well. Connect people with resources throughout the state to either find their first customer, validate that their product is going to meet, some regulatory classes, meet, somebody like Pete who has the pulse on URI, connect them with a researcher, and then just talk about the structure of their organization. So, can you go for venture funding as an S corp, a C corp, or an LLC? What do you actually need to do? Just those basic conversations. But if you go into, a VC's office and you don't have your house in order, they're not even going to listen to your pitch. So that's another service I think is part of those innovation campuses that's really important just to meet the bare basics.
Yeah. And that venture mentoring services VMS program is actually derivative of the MIT venture mentoring services. So that's the Rhode Island version of it. And as Will says that too, and I sometimes become guilty of this, as we talk about the blue economy, I pointed out a lot of the programs that are more blue tech focused, but I'd be remiss if I didn't also point out that there are organizations like, as you probably know, it's interesting how the blue economy pervades everything. And so there are food technology accelerators like Hope in Maine that can get involved very much in the blue economy. There are medical device organizations and drug discovery organizations. We have New England Medical Innovation Center, NEMIC, with Aiden Petrie and Company, who are very involved in, and now even have their own venture fund associated with it. I think Magpie Innovations. And I'm sure I've forgotten somebody else very much. Oh, a Social Enterprise Greenhouse.
Right, and they're here too.
And they're in Kelly Ramirez and team, and I was one of the original people in Social Venture Partners that became Social Enterprise Greenhouse. They have an incredible track record, and you won't find anybody better than Kelly and her team at helping startups find capitalization to move forward. And Kelly has definitely had some blue economy startups as well as others. So,
And
Pete, I'll just
E4,
add on to that next Wednesday we're actually having an event here called PPP, People Who Pivoted During the Pandemic. So it's going to feature
All
those three
characters.
organizations. So RIHub, SCG, Social Enterprise Greenhouse, and Hope in Maine, and they're going to be panelists, and they're going to talk about how they were able to support their startup. People who are trying to do startup companies, how they were able to support them during the pandemic, and then they'll feature an entrepreneur within, their groups. So I think it'll be really inspiring.
that's fantastic. Molly gets it, so that's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, they're amazing, and they all have a presence here and want to partner with us. So if anybody wants to follow up with me on getting, I can put you in touch with anybody. Okay. Are there any other questions? Yes.
I'm in the pleasure marine business, and it's not innovative or anything, but the products that are going into the motor yachts and sailboats are getting, as sophisticated as they're all trickling down from the.
Well, it's all crossover technology. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, now you can run your 100-foot yacht with your iPhone, right?
Absolutely.
And the biggest bottleneck, aside from delivery of product, which everybody's experiencing, is the support 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, 10 years down the road. And, getting the people not who are innovating and sort of in this sphere, but the guys on the ground,
Yeah.
women and men on the ground who are trying to fix this person's yacht. This
Absolutely.
person's, we're a little bit involved in the offshore wind industry and some other commercial areas. And that seems to be the biggest bottleneck. It's not glamorous, it's not.
Yeah.
We've got a company working on that, actually.
Yeah.
We, in our incubator, there's a company working on all kinds of services for that, yeah.
I mean, just getting food on the ground seems to be the biggest thing. That's got to start at the.
Absolutely, you know, I mean, to be a little bit generic, it all starts with workforce development and
Yeah.
making sure the marine trades. We have there are some folks in the room. I think some of the folks from Harrishoff are here who actually really work with RIMTA, Rhode Island Marine Trades, and do all kinds of development and workforce development, which, by the way, is very good for equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so you're absolutely right. It's very key that we develop those people, and that's really core. When we drive forward with even these innovation campuses, the whole idea is behind creating jobs and the people to support them.
Brian, I'm going to spotlight Brian Dursey. He's here from RIMTA. And, you know, I encourage you on this topic to come back to the session on the marine trades, because I think you'll hear a lot more about that. Thank you for your question. Any other questions? Yes.
Okay. What do our students need? What type of skills do they need that we could put into the curriculum?
And are we talking?
Robotics, but it seems like it's all isolated and it's not combined.
Right. So, and are you talking?
Okay.
You're talking
I mean,
primary
All
school.
age, all
Yes.
age,
right,
yeah.
K through 12 plus.
You want me to take this?
Yeah. Well, first of all, yeah, I can start to wing off some things, but
Go for
here's
it.
an expert. No, you
No,
go
no,
ahead.
no,
No,
no.
please. She comes from education, and that's why I enjoy working with Judith so much.
My recommendation is a lot of experiential learning,
Yeah.
right? Getting kids experiencing things. And every child should be exposed to coding, how to code at a very early age. There's one of my favorite entrepreneurs is this young woman. She's now 14. I first started following her when she was 7. She came up with a board game, you know, like a board game, like a real old-fashioned board game for learning how to code. And it's for, 4 years old to 400. And every school, every library should have that. Kids should be learning and understanding what coding is. Doesn't mean that they need to do coding, but to understand what coding is, how a computer works. Because at the end of the day, that's just a tool, but they need to understand it, right? It's kind of like understanding GIS in the tech world, right? Coding is very important. Critical thinking skills. That you know, and kids really need to play, because playing as young people, that creates that critical thinking.
Yeah.
Playing as adults as well, right? And if you're interested in getting kids interested in the water, get them out on the water. I used to work at the International Center for Theoretical Physics in Italy for a number of years, and the physicists and the mathematicians there, 99% of those men and women, when they were a child before the age of 10, had spent an hour or a summer out on a sailboat. But that 1 hour in the sailboat changed their life, because they had to think about what was happening with the wind and turning, and it changed everything for them.
So totally unaided, per usual, Judith came up with the exact punchline that
Sorry.
I was going to. No.
Punch and Judy, right?
No,
Yeah.
it's
There
perfect.
we go.
She's so, people much smarter than me. And I think you have Jen McCann coming in, which she's
Yeah.
incredible.
She's smarter than both of us
Yeah,
put together.
And the biggest takeaway is really creating access and experience with the ocean. In this case, talking about the blue economy and whatnot,
Yeah.
really creating experiential situations and having people have access to the water, and having our kids have access to the waters and get out on a boat and see the inner workings of much of the industry that's out there is the most key thing.
I'll just add, I'm from an education background too, and
That's
that,
right.
that it's like the experiential learning fuels the intrinsic motivation. And when somebody's intrinsically motivated to do something, they will, you know, strive to be better and engaged and everything. So I totally agree with that. I would also just add that soft skills. I'm sure you've heard that term.
Yeah.
You know, being in education, and most recently I worked at IRIS, School of Technology and Trades, as the career development manager. So I was helping place our students with companies. And so I would work with companies to, you know, identify their needs and then find a good match. And every single company, what they said to me when I asked them, what type of employee are you looking for? They would say, somebody with the strong soft skills. So what soft skills are: critical thinking, work ethic, being open-minded and willingness to learn and try new things, communication skills, being able to work on a team, the life skills. Those, because the technical skills can be taught, but you need to have the motivation and drive to get there. So I would definitely add soft skills. Yes.
Just to branch onto that with education, with K-12. Kids would love it. Kids love to code, kids love the ocean, kids love to sail. How do we get their teachers that have been in the profession for 10 to 40 years to understand that value and to change how they approach it? And is URI's education department bringing the blue economy into the elementary space?
I think they are, and I think Jen will talk more about that.
Yeah.
So our Blue Institute, which is our sister nonprofit, it's for education and research and community engagement. And one of the programs that we're planning is for teachers. So the core of that is a semester away program for students to come. We have relationships with over 100 colleges and universities for students to come, university students to come here for a semester and learn all about the blue economy and blue tech and experience these different things. These are not for STEM students. They're in a rigorous course. But as we've been exploring this for the last 4 years and talking to people around the country, it's the K through 12 teachers, especially the K through 8 teachers, right, that are like, hey, what about us? And our solution to that is to do summer programming. So there's a phrase, I'm blanking on it. It's not a staycation, but it's like you're taking a vacation for 4 days and you're also going to do another 4 days. So you travel somewhere and you do those teacher PDPs, I forget what they're called, the professional development points. Yep. And then you can also do a vacation. So they want to come here from all over the country and get immersed in what we see curriculum that they could do with their students. So they would actually be doing the curriculum that their kids would be studying. And that's engaging them. You know, there's the carrot about going to a really interesting place to do this, but it's also them getting to experience it and how they can bring that home. And they can be in Ohio and they want their kids to experience water, right? Because at the end of the day, the water in Ohio ends up in the ocean and the ocean water ends up in Ohio. Yeah. So, yeah.
You asked a question. I want to make one more point too. You asked about at URI, what they're doing. And I actually bought a few copies of this. I think I have 8 or 10. We've actually started a collab at URI, and that's a cross-functional, cross-college effort aimed at mitigating plastics in the ocean. Mm-hmm. And this goes to every single college at the university. I think there's over 50 researchers working on every aspect of it, from education to the social sciences, to engineering, to oceanography, to life sciences. So that is how the institutions are trying to drive that across, even educating the next educators on how to focus on these topics. And this one's near and dear to my heart. I've got 10 copies of this here. If you want one, I'll get you another one if you can't get one of these. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions before we wrap up? Yes?
It's not a question,
Oh.
but there is something called the
Fantastic.
something that can help get this on the radar of high school, because like you're saying, the teachers aren't gonna teach it if it's not on the test, and you
Yeah.
weren't relevant, but there's a
No,
lot
that's not
of
what I
other,
was saying, but,
but
yeah.
there are a number of things that
We have to
get
get
in the
away from
way
talking
of,
about teaching to the test, but we have to start talking about getting teachers jazzed to bring that energy into the classrooms. The kids will do well on the test because they will want to learn how to read and do math, because they want to learn how to.
So we need to get teachers excited, and we need to get
Yeah.
and we need to get principals excited. And I think it starts with something like this, where we're educating people and building the excitement and sharing all that's going on out there. Thanks to you both again, because you're sharing. There's so much happening. So think of the ripple effect that could happen from just tonight. You know, you go home and you tell a few people, or you post something, or you know, I mean, we can spread the word and build excitement ourselves. We can play a role in that anyway. So.
I should take a picture.
All right, well, I think that wraps it up, but thank you all so much for coming tonight. Thank you again to our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you again to our IT gentlemen. Thanks to our volunteers back there, Olivia and Anna. And please feel free to, again, have a refreshment, but I hope you'll come back next week. Thank you.